there are other qualities which make a person be shaded under Allah's shade. Let's go through them quickly, inshaAllah, just to give you a good feeling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy and blessing. So not everybody can apply all these 7 perfectly. So Allah gives out of His mercy others. The hadiths are in Fathul Bari by Imam Ibn Hajar. He said, the scenario, it is an Islamic belief, it is the Muslim belief that after this world there is a day of judgment, a day of accountability. The evil who got away with his or her evil shall be held to be accountable and questioned for every evil they did, every injustice they did. God help them. Well, there's no help for them on the day of judgment, but God help them now if they are not guided and fix their ways. Every person who did an atom's worth of evil, it will be produced. And every person who did an atom's worth of good, it will be produced. So those who did good and nobody noticed and died and passed away, Allah has recorded every atom's worth. Nothing goes lost. Right now is our work. The hereafter is Allah's work. Now we work, now we obey, now we worship, now we have choice, now we have freedom, and we have a conscience to choose which way we want to go. But everything will be recorded. In the hereafter day of judgment, it is Allah who acts and we have to receive. We are judged. No more worship on that day, no more good deeds. No more saying, Ya Rab, take me back, let me do better. It's over. Allah has given us the guidance, He's given us the Quran, He's given us the prophets and messengers. And now in this modern world, nearly every person in the world hears about the guidance of Allah. We have the Quran that is unchanged, and the Messenger Muhammad ﷺ's words, they shine and they get even bigger and greater and more manifested than any other time. La ilaha illallah. Rasul ﷺ did say, لَيَبْلُغُ هَذَا الدِّينَ مَا بَلَغَ اللَّيْلُ وَالنَّهَارِ. This deen of Allah, this religion of Allah will reach whatever the night and day has reached, until it enters until it does not leave out a single home, whether it is urban or city, in remote land or in the heart, meaning 90%, 99% of the world it will reach, and it will enter with either the people receiving it with pride and happiness, or it will approach them and they will reject it and they will receive it with agony, hate and misery. But it will face you, the truth will face you. So we are seeing that now. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam tells us, and of course the verses are many in the Quran about the hereafter, the day of judgment. He said, the hadith is in Al-Imam Ahmad and many similar to it. He said, on the day of accountability, the sun will come closer to the earth. How will it come closer? Only Allah knows. Is it the same sun as today? Most likely not. In fact, the Quran says the heavens will change and the earth will change from what you see now. Therefore, the physics we know today, the celestial bodies and the way the sun is, the way the moon is, will not be the same after the world ends and the day of accountability comes. It says the sun will be so close to the earth, and people everywhere who were standing there shall sweat. The sweat is not normal. It's not like the sweat here on a hot day, 40, 45 or 50 degrees. People will sweat. And then he described it as follows. Some sweat will reach their ankles. Others will sweat until it reaches their knees. Others will sweat until it reaches their hips. Others will sweat until the sweat reaches their shoulders. Others will sweat until their sweat reaches their mouth. Others will sweat until the sweat covers them all together from their sweat. Everyone depending on the amount of sins that they have accumulated in this life. Then he said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, giving us hope. He said, and there will be on that day 7 types of characters, 7 types of people. And then he describes their qualities. 7 who will be shaded and protected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the hardships of that day. How will He protect them? Either by the shade of His throne, or by His own protection in different ways, or whether the angels will come and surround that person and protect him and give him or her the feeling of safety and security. There are many different ways that Allah gives protection. So the word shade in Arabic is a metaphor for protection, support, and looking after you and sheltering you from all of the harm on that day, including the sun. And he enumerated, the hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim. Number 1, Imamun Adil, a just ruler, a just leader. Number 2, a young person, a youth who spent their youth in the worship of Allah. The youth is from puberty and what's generally agreed among the scholars up to 35. Some said 40. And some even went to the extent of 50. But generally speaking, 35. Number 3, a man whose heart is connected and attached to the places of worship. Number 4, two men or two people who meet each other and love each other for the sake of Allah. When they meet, it's for the sake of Allah. When they depart, it's also for the sake of Allah. I'll explain it soon. Number 5, a man whom a woman of beauty and status called him to inappropriate, or called him to the bed, and then he remembers Allah and says, I fear Allah. Number 6, a man who donates so secretly that nobody else knows. Another hadith says his left does not know what his right did. Again, this is a metaphor, but I'll explain it. And a man who remembers Allah in seclusion, so much so that the fear of Allah makes his heart weep, makes his eyes weep, and he cries. The first thing I want to say about this, number 1, are there other things that a person can do which will cause them to be shaded on the Day of Judgment, other than these 7? The answer is yes. And I will inshallah say what they are. Number 2, is this hadith only for men? Since Rasulullah is always saying a man, 2 men. And I want you to learn this principle, brothers and sisters, forever. Anytime the Quran or a hadith says men, by default, it also means women. And this is unanimously agreed by all the scholars and all the Arabs who speak Arabic. And whenever a woman is mentioned in the Quran or in the hadith, automatically it also means the men. Unless there is specific verse or hadith that tells you no, it is only specified for women or only specified for men. An example of where men are mentioned, which includes women, is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in the Quran, those who are honest and truthful in their worship, then there is no harm upon them and no sadness. And He mentions it in the masculine term, al-mu'mineen. The feminine term is al-mu'minat, but Allah says al-mu'mineen. That means it is also the women, because women also worship and pray. Same thing. In another verse of the Quran, Allah mentions women. He says, those who accuse women of inchastity, of indecent behavior, accuse them and do not bring 4 witnesses who eyewitnessed the fornication, then whip each one of those who accused her with 80 lashes each, so they do not accuse people. The ayah is talking about the women, but it's also true for the men. Any woman who accuses men of zina or fornication or adultery should also bring 4 witnesses, otherwise the women are also whipped 80 lashes for their accusation. So these are 2 examples of verses where men are mentioned, but the women apply, and women are mentioned and men are applied. But where a verse is specific to women, such as their dress code, such as specific matters in divorce, such as specific matters in pregnancy and breastfeeding, of course we know that these verses are specific for women. And there are others specific for men. We're not going to talk about that today, but generally speaking, 90%, whenever you say men, it means women. And definitely in all of these 7 characteristics Rasulullah mentioned, it is for both men and women. Let's go through them inshaAllah. But before we go through them, I promised you, there are other qualities which make a person be shaded under Allah's shade. Let's go through them quickly inshaAllah, just to give you a good feeling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy and blessing. So not everybody can apply all these 7 perfectly. So Allah gives out of His mercy others. The hadiths are in Fathul Bari by Imam Ibn Hajar. He said, also the one who is shaded is the one who relieves someone's hardship and burdens. There are people who have that quality. They love to help people who are destitute and in hardship, and they always go out of their ways to find a way to relieve their hardships, whatever they're going through. Whether it's through government debts or bills, whether it's something going on in their family that they are stuck in, whether it's homelessness, whether it's job, whether it's anything. These people go out of their way helping for the sake of Allah, not as a job, but for the sake of Allah, to relieve these people from their burdens. And even people who take on a job, with the intention that it is for the sake of Allah, because they like to relieve people's hardships, then inshallah they also fall under this. Number 2, someone who helps someone else pay off their debt. Also, again, these are people who will be under his shade. Number 3, excelling in good character. A person's character reaches a point where they are amazing, that person will be shaded. Another one is the person who loves walking to the places of worship, to the mosques, footsteps. Another one is defending someone's right and to get their right back. Someone who advocates and works to get the right of somebody who their right has been taken away from them. Another one is an honest and trustworthy businessman or businesswoman, a person who is trading or doing business, selling and buying. They are honest and fair and trustworthy in their trade. They'll be shaded under Allah's shade. An orphan sponsorer, a person who sponsors orphans, will also be under Allah's shade. Another one is a financially generous person who helps others or spends on others in need. They're not miserly, they're always helping. That person will be under Allah's shade. Another one is sheltering and protecting a person in need or in fear, giving protection and peace to somebody who is in fear. Also, and obviously justly, not when somebody is in fear because they've killed someone, no. But a person is generally in fear when they're oppressed. Another one is making wudu properly even in discomfort and inconvenience. You still make wudu and you don't say, I'm not going to make wudu, I'm going to let my prayer go because it's too cold or it's rainy. Another one is sheltering and protecting a resistance fighter in truth and justice, a fighter who is fighting in truth and justice, who is protecting the innocent. Another one is supporting and assisting a soldier who stands for justice and peace. In Islam, of course. All of these brothers and sisters earn a person shelter on the Day of Judgment so long as they die upon these characteristics. And now let us go to the 7. What is the difference between the 7 who are shaded and these ones that I mentioned? Why did Rasulullah mention the 7 by themselves and gave so much emphasis and importance to them? And these other ones I mentioned are scattered hadiths here and there. The answer to that is what the scholars said. The 7 that the Rasul ﷺ mentioned, they reside in the core of the heart of a person and they guide your actions. Whereas the others, they reside in your actions and they then eventually affect your heart. One comes from within and the actions are automatically shown, and the other ones, they come from your actions with some foundation in your heart, but they improve your heart. So therefore the 7 is really who you are. It's the core of your heart. It's like the CPU of your brain, like the computer, right? It's the heart of it, and it governs your actions. Whereas the other one is just for people out of blessings and mercy from Allah, for those who don't reach that level.